Blizzard has just made a absolutely broken rune for Warrior that's going to enable people to top the meters while tanking with a two-hander. But first, a little bit of theory on how the game's DPS works, so that way this broken mechanic makes some more sense. Most classes scale like this, linearly. Warriors scale like this, quadratically. When a warrior gets a little more gear, it doesn't just hit harder. It also gets more rage, which then enables it to do more abilities. This means that we get scaling in upon itself with this little loop right here. More gear, more damage, more abilities. All the other classes, they skip that last part, so they lack this feedback loop. Warriors only break this loop when they run out of things to spend rage on. This is where our rune comes in. Warrior has a new ability called Quick Strike. It's a rage sink, much like Heroic Strike. But Quick Strike is instant cast, and this makes it far superior. We can now get the benefits of Heroic Strike without losing out on generating rage altogether. All we need now is a great two-hander that you can reliably get in time for your first raid, and you'll be able to use this broken rune to top the meters and have a crazy combo. But first, let's cover a couple of the other runes that we're going to be leveraging too. Flagellation. It's a chest rune. The lack of Berserker Rage is going to make this kind of unpopular on launch. The only way you'd normally be able to activate it would be using Blood Rage. Berserker Rage isn't in the game yet, and most people are not going to have the Enrage talent if they're a tank, because you'd only be able to have it if you put no points in prot, which is what we're planning on doing. This will give us about a 40% uptime on Flagellation all on its own, and this is going to be the first hidden advantage we'll have over other tanks. The final rune that we'll be using is going to be Consumed by Rage. As a tank, you'll probably get rage capped frequently. That means this rune's going to just be up all the time. But even if it's not happening on accident, you can just force yourself to get rage capped for a moment. That way you always deal extra damage. The last rune, of course, is Quick Strike itself. But what have we actually created so far? A warrior tank with about 50% more damage done, and that uses a two-hander. We also have a way to instantly burn our rage. This sounds nice, but where's the broken part? Well, enter Wind Fury. On Horde, warriors sometimes use Hamstring to proc Wind Fury. Even though Hamstring does almost zero damage itself, it's still worth it. The reason being that the Wind Fury procs deal damage and also generate enough rage to pay for the Hamstrings. Now, Quick Strike is very similar to Hamstring here. It's going to have a similar rage cost, be instant cast, but now on Alliance, you'll have access to Wind Fury. Well, what are the big differences here then? Quick Strike deals about an auto attack's worth of damage, whereas Hamstring does about 0. So that means if you had to do 3 Hamstrings to proc 1 Wind Fury, you can now do 3 Quick Strikes instead. So that means over the course of these 3 globals, you'll do about triple the damage using Quick Strike as you would using Hamstring, because you'll have 3 more times you strike the boss. Now, if we could also get the part to be true, where the ability being used generates more rage than it costs, then we can have something crazy happen. There's not a lot of abilities for warriors at level 25, but if you could pull this off, it would mean that you could spam Quick Strike on global for every global. And so you'd be basically swinging a two-handed weapon at like a 1.5 attack speed with 50% increased damage. That would be very goofy in my opinion. But for this to happen, we'd need to have high hits on our autos. So we'll need a special weapon. It's going to need a few features. The appropriate weapon skill. Because if we don't have the right weapon skill, it'll be much harder to have the weapon's auto attacks hit hard enough. We'll also need a slow attack speed, because high DPS isn't sufficient. We need high damage per hit. That way the Wind Furies end up being very powerful. And preferably, this should be easy to get. Mostly because I hate guides that tell people to acquire items like T-Boos. I think that's very, very lame and stupid. So here's the secret weapon. Glacial Stone. It's a green. It's from a quest in Ashenvale. And there's only one downside. There's a great sacrifice you need to make in order to get this weapon. It's at the end of the chain that gets you Dartul's Rod of Transformation, the thing that turns you into a walking bear person. But once you're this deep into the chain, you can transform no more. You have to hand in the rod in order to deal this damage. Some people will be like, who cares? I'll just make another warrior before the deeper content patches. And so your final main will have this rod. Or you could get the hammer from Dead Mines. Smite's Mighty Hammer. It's very, very similar stat-wise. After you factor in the strength on it, it hits pretty much equivalently per auto to the Glacial Stone. The Glacial Stone's slower, so it is going to scale ever so slightly better with AP, but it's probably not going to make a difference. Awesome. So now we have all the parts we need. We have a weapon that hits very hard. We have a ability that generates more rage than it costs, and that we can hit infinitely. Okay. Do we need any gear? Not really. Because you see, if you had straight best in slot attack power gear for level 25, it would only make up about 40% of your damage on a swing anyways. Nearly all the damage at a low level is going to come from the weapon itself, unlike at level 60, where the lion's share of your damage actually comes from the attack power. So in this case, you don't really need to get anything else to start dealing massive damage. You can simply take every strength/AP upgrade you come into contact with on the way to 25, perform this quest chain and get the Glacial Stone, or go to Dead Mines a few times, and then you can start jumping into dungeons. Now, of course, if your weapon skill is not maces, then you'll want to get an axe. If you're not an orc or a human, they're going to need to change how weapon skill works. Otherwise, you're going to have a very hard time having a weapon that hits hard enough on average. The reason why is because glances happen on 40% of your attacks, and then the penalty is scaled based on your actual weapon skill. So even if you have weapon skill, 40% of your attacks will glance, but if you have weapon skill, the penalty will be 15% instead of 40%. And that 25% difference is going to be really hard for you to overcome rage generation wise. So definitely I would suggest roll as a human or an orc if you are very interested in PvP. And otherwise, just hope that Blizzard puts those weapon skill changes out fast, because that is something that they brought up at BlizzCon. Thanks.